Welcome to Discovering Biblical Treasures, our mini-series on Hanukkah, Part 2. Today we're going to be looking at, again, 1 Maccabees, which is the story of Hanukkah, and we're going to start on chapter 3, and we're going to go from verse 1 to chapter 9, verse 22. This is the story of Judas Maccabee. This is the story of Hanukkah. Judas Maccabee was a daring military leader. He had the knowledge for it. He had the gifts for it. He put together an army and he defeated Antiochus the Fourth, the Fifth, and Demetrius the First. These are the three, if you will, sequential kings that were kings of the Seleucid kingdom that were controlling Judea, Jerusalem, and most importantly, the temple. Judas is celebrated as a redeemer, a savior. You can almost say the Messiah. But since the Greeks they were kind of kicked out. As you'll see through the history, it's an interesting story. But since the Romans ended up destroying Judea, if you will, as a nation and making it part of the Roman Empire, he didn't quite fit all the Messiah traditions, but at his time he was considered Messiah. Judas defeated Apollonius, and when he defeated him, he took his sword, Apollonius' sword, and carried it into subsequent battles, like David did when he killed Goliath. For the legends tell us that he not only did he grab his head to show Israel he won, he also grabbed his sword. And then when he went into subsequent battles, he took that sword with him. Continuing on, along the way in these great battles, I'm just going to describe a couple. One of the battles is he met the general Seron, who had superior numbers. And Judas gave a speech to the army that echoed the one Jonathan gives the army in 1 Samuel 14:6. He wins that battle, but then Antiochus IV, who was king at the time, pursues him across the land, and Judas would hide in the mountains and was able to do this. But Judas didn't have money. He didn't have the support he needed of the people. A lot of people in Jerusalem just loved Hellenism. Eventually, Antiochus IV gave the general Lysias about half of his army and all of his elephants to go destroy Judea, and Jerusalem. And then he was supposed to resettle foreigners in the land. He wanted to destroy the Jews completely. Had an army of about 40,000 men. And at the time, Jerusalem was inhabited by a lot of Gentiles. A lot of Greeks were there. The temple was in pagan hands. Pagan worship was going on in the temple. This is what infuriated the Maccabees to call to order. There was an assembly at a town called Mitzpah, and they determined there, Judas and his generals decided, here's how we're going to retake Jerusalem. We're going to go in and get to the temple. As the story continues, Gorgias, another general of the Seleucid Empire, he was surprise attacked by Judah and Judas destroyed a large part of his army. Judas was using guerrilla tactics, and that's why he won. And Judas then, because of this defeat, which was outside of Jerusalem, was able to take Jerusalem, and he took back the temple, put it back into Jewish control. Judas removed the temple. He removed the temple furnishings that were pagan, brought back the ones that were Jewish, like the altar table and the menorah, and he started the rituals, the proper rituals that told us about our worship to the Lord. And Hanukkah becomes the festival of the rededication of the temple under Judas. Hanach meaning to dedicate. Antiochus IV had pillaged the temple, but it was Judas who restored it. The rededication of the temple, and this is where Hanukkah comes, December 14th, 164 BCE, 3 years to the day when it had been defiled. The dedication lasted for 8 days. They did the 8 days because the first temple was dedicated for 8 days in 1 Kings chapter 8, and Hezekiah, it also rededicates the temple in 2 Chronicles. The second temple, same thing. Judas declares an annual observance of 8 days starting on the 25th day of the month of Kislev. But here's the shocker. No mention of the story of the oil, the miracle of the 1 day of oil lasting for 8 days. So where did it come from? After an extensive search, we find that it came from the Talmud, from Tract Shabbat, and that's where you find the story. So you can actually ask the question, did it really happen? The oil. Or is it a story that developed as a Semitic story over the years? Either way, we still celebrate that. To finish up, Judah, the war wasn't over when he won the temple back and he got Jerusalem, as I was taught when I was a kid, and you might have been taught. Judas turns around and attacks Idumea, Ammon, Gilead, Galilee, to the coastal plain. He goes to take back the land. But there was the citadel I mentioned earlier in the last episode. The citadel was still there in Jerusalem. It was still in Greek hands. And until Antiochus IV died, Judas did not attack it. He does eventually. The citadel is captured in 141. It's dismantled by Simon, Judah's brother. Judah's army starts to lose battles. They came close to a defeat, but a peace treaty was put together and accepted between the Seleucids and Jerusalem. The temple ended up back in the priests' hands, but unfortunately the priests that were loyal to the Seleucids. Judas sought and tried to get, and did, I should say, an alliance with the Romans, and Judas then dies in March of 160 BCE. We're not sure why, but probably because he got wounded in battle. That is the story of Judas Maccabee. I hope you found it interesting as we continue with part 3 of this mini-series. God bless you. Thanks for listening, and shalom.